Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm with Matt Villard of MCV Wines in Paso Robles. Matt, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us a little bit about MCV and where we are. Are we in Tin City?
Yes, we're in Tin City. It's the annex, I guess. The owner of Tin City built these three large buildings, so it's three 15,000 square foot buildings that he's subdividing between wineries, and so I have almost the front half of one of them, and then I guess we're going to be called the annex. But he's got another like 90,000 square foot building he's putting up for another section of annex, and he's subdividing out. So we are Tin City.
Yeah. Well, so it's very cool. So Tin City is sort of a tasting room area of some really cool wineries just south of Paso Robles, of the town of Paso. We're not in the vineyard here, but tell me where are you sourcing from? Do you own vineyards? And tell us a little bit about MCV.
So I started MCV in 2011, and I started with some Petite Syrah, and it's one of my main vineyards. We almost purchased it. We just didn't quite get numbers correctly everywhere. So we ended up passing, but we still get all the fruit. We manage it. It's the one vineyard that I'm out there like doing every decision, everything, even some of the own work. And then we'll be tasting that one a little bit. And then, so I source all of my fruit. I don't own any vineyards at the moment. Started in 2011 with Petite Syrah from that vineyard, and then kind of rounded it out with a little more Petite Syrah, some Syrah Grenache, and so we specialize in Petite Syrah and unique blends. And Alice and I right now have my 1105 flagship, so it's Petite Syrah, Syrah Grenache, Tannat, Petit Verdot, and Viognier is listed on the bottle because I co-ferment my Syrah with about 3% Viognier.
Wow. So how many cases do you make?
We're up to around 12 or 1,300. 12 or
1,300. And are you available across the country or in particular markets?
Yes. We're growing pretty quickly on one side because I have a nationally distributed red wine priced it's around $20 retail. I think we're in 9 states. Wisconsin, Texas, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, DC, and Delaware, and then California, Nevada. And then soon we'll be in Oregon, Washington, Idaho as well.
Oh, well, MCV wines across America. So you said that you specialize in Petite Syrah. I'm wondering, what is your first memory relevant to wine? I mean, I'm not sure it wasn't a Petite Syrah.
My first memory is... That's a good question. I don't have any specific moment, but my parents are wine collectors, and so they've been going up to Napa and buying good wines for years and years. I mean, I grew up drinking like 91 Caymus, 94 Caymus before the prices kind of skyrocketed, and then when those skyrocketed, they started finding different places like Villard and Schaefer and those, and when those prices did. So my parents like to find the best wines for a reasonable price, I guess. They're just not willing to spend $300 on a bottle of wine. No. And so basically it's kind of just an overall memory of growing up with good wine. And we grew up kind of the European style, and so I was able to, drink wine with dinner from probably the age of 15 or something.
Wow.
So.
That's pretty lucky. And pretty good wine. So once you started getting into wine, what was one of the most memorable wines you ever drank? Was there an occasion where you had one of those aha moments where you tasted a wine and it set you on a path either to making Petite Syrah or making wine or just understanding something new about wine?
Even in college, I was drinking a lot of wine. It wasn't expensive wine, but it also wasn't like bag box wine. It was, the $7, $8, $9 things of, Bogle, Ravenswood, Cardinals Inn, things like that. Wow. But I always really liked Petite Syrah. And then my big aha moment, what really made me want to do Petite Syrah was EOS back in, I don't even think I was 21 yet when I had this wine. We were out tasting, and I'm old enough where you used to be able to go if you were with your parents and nobody would card, but that's no longer the case. We all card pretty aggressively now. But it was EOS Coupe Grande, so they're high-end stuff, and they had a Coupe Grande Petite Syrah, and this was like 2001, 2002, maybe 2003. $60 Petite Syrah. It was amazing. It kind of like that life-changing moment of like, oh my goodness, Petite Syrah can be like this. And so that's what, even when I was at Davis and doing wine stuff, I worked for Andy Walker in the vineyards, and he's a very famous grape breeder. So I was actually for a long time contemplating moving to Oregon and crossing Pinot Noir, which is another one of my favorite grapes, with Petite Syrah, and see if we can't get something bigger, inkier, but that you can grow in cold weather and have it be a little bit more standalone as well.
Wow.
So didn't materialize. I'm here in Paso, which I love Paso, so I'm very happy where I ended up. But there was a moment there where I almost did that.
Did that. Wow. I'm still curious. So if we were to come into your home and go into your cellar, what kind of wines would we find? What do you have? A lot of domestic wines? Do you have a lot of international wines? Are there particular regions or varieties that you own, collect? I don't know if you're collecting for aging or just collecting for drinking.
I used to collect, but I own a winery now. We just moved into this new facility, and machinery is not inexpensive, and so my cellar has been depleted. It's mostly MCV at the moment, but it's actually mostly empty because I drink my wine. I love my wine, but I also like other people's wines. I've actually gotten comments about that from other wine salesmen, like, wow, you really drink a lot of other people's wines. And it's actually very important in the wine industry. You don't want to get cellar palate. If you just only drink your own wine, you lock yourself into only liking the flavors that you make. Yeah. And it's very important because you'll never see when you have a flaw in your wine. You'll never see if there's a problem. You never have the opportunity to make it better because you can always strive to make something better. But generally, I buy a lot of wine at Costco from their foreign section. We have it's classified as an A wine warehouse. They have the top tier stuff. I mean, they have a Grand Cru or a Premier Cru Chablis, Costco signature, Kirkland signature brand. It's like $17 for Premier Cru Chablis. It's amazing. But I just load up on European whites, off varieties that we can't find here. They have a great Chenin for like $14. And I mean, it's hard to find really amazing Cab Franc in Paso. There's definitely some good Cab Franc, but this is like a top tier Chenin for not much money. I tend to drink Northern European whites for the most part. That's where my palate kind of falls. I'll drink some New Zealand Sauv Blanc, but I generally don't drink very much domestic white wine. It's mostly European import. In terms of reds, I'm almost all domestic on the reds. There are exceptions like Chenin or some Italian stuff for, I hold some decent Italian stuff back for some different things.
From a particular region or?
Yeah, usually like Barolos and Sangiovestis and Montepulcianos, just basically, I'm half French, half Italian. So I cook a lot of Italian food, and so I want to have, a lot of times have a very nice Italian variety of wine to go with it. But domestically, I tend to drink a lot of wine from here, and I definitely drink a lot of Paso wine, but also a lot of Napa Cabs and things. And so for a long time, I had a really nice cellar from when I was working in Napa. I would go buy Napa wines and hold them back. Like when I was at Quintessa, I had purchased quite a bit of Quintessa, but that was 07, so I'm pretty sure we drank the last bottle on my birthday 3 years ago. So it's it's been a while.
Well, I know you're, in the middle of harvest right now and you're working crazy hours, so you're probably not relaxing too much. But what was one of the greatest wines you've drunk of late that you opened from your home or maybe at a restaurant or, from a friend? Was there a great wine that you opened recently? And I'm hoping it was sooner than 3 years ago when you opened up that Quintessa.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I definitely have some nice wines. I have a few that I'm definitely holding until after harvest. But off the top of my head, nothing's really standing out. But I don't usually get to eat right now. I'm not eating dinner with my family or opening wine with my family. I mean, it's just not happening. So we don't tend to open nicer things. So nothing's really standing out in my head right now, unfortunately. I wish I had better news for you, but it's just,
I'm so sorry for you.
I think last night when I got home, I ate alone because I got home at like 8:30, and then I had a sample of bulk Petite Syrah that I just took home and drank because it was actually very good. So I think that was what I had last night.
Well, speaking of Petite Syrah, you're a big fan of Petite Syrah, making a lot of it. Would you qualify it as a perfect variety, or do you think there is a such thing as a perfect variety?
I think perfect is a little bit too black and white. I think that all grapes are good in some ways and all grapes are bad in some ways, and it's based on palate. Because a perfect wine for me is not the perfect wine for you or any of your listeners. Everybody's going to have a different idea of what's perfect. And so I like Petite Syrah. It's a big mid-palate grape. I definitely have some 100% that we're going to taste. But just like almost any wine grape, having a little bit of something else always rounds it out and kind of gives it different characters. And so I have one called Black, which we'll finish with, which is Tannat. Petite Syrah predominantly with Tannat and Petit Verdot, so you got front and back palate, because Petite Syrah is just a mid-palate grape, and so if you give it a little oomph in the mid and back palate, you round it out and you can create just a little bit more character.
Mm-hmm. So the blending kind of does that. And in terms of growing, is there something you would call perfect, or?
Petite Syrah is pretty easy to grow. It's a very tight cluster, so you got to be on top of bunch rot. But we're so windy here that we don't usually have bunch rot issues in Paso, because the winds pick up at 3, 4, 5 o'clock and blow out all the humidity. And because we're in California, we don't tend to get heavy rains mid-season. It's not usually a major issue for us. But Petite Syrah, the problem with Petite Syrah is not that it's hard to grow, it's that it likes to grow too much. And so you're in there dropping fruit, cutting back canopy, keeping the canopy raised, because it is a beast. I mean, you hear stories of like 13 tons an acre sometimes. So, I've seen clusters that must weigh 5 pounds on their own.
Wow.
Not here, that's more like Central Valley, jug wine level of growth, but you'll see clusters that are literally as long as my forearm and as big as a
crazy.
I don't know how big that is.
So perfection is, again, too black and white, and it really is in the eye of the beholder as a grower and a winemaker. So, of course, I hate using that word perfection, but, winemakers aspire to make the best wines possible. What is your opinion about wine critics and scores and how that plays into wine?
There's good sides and bad sides, just like anything, like critics of movies, critics of food, critics of whatever. There's a lot of their own, they're tasting based on their own palates. And then if you agree with their palates and you buy from them, there are certainly quality levels of wine that are true. A 95 point wine from one critic is probably going to be in the 90s from another. And overall, it's going to be a better wine than a wine that, say, got 75.
Right.
And that is absolutely true. Whether you agree that it's 95 versus a 91 or 98 versus a 92, that's very much up to interpretation. But there is definitely some quality levels. And, I like scores. I think they keep the industry striving to be a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
With everything in life, you got to take it with a little bit of grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. So, talking to you as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Red. And like I said, I like European whites. It's hard to find anything better than a really good Chablis for me, or a sparkling. I love sparkling. I will go out looking for, and I like champagne, but I actually like going out and finding interesting Cremants. Like I found one and I can't find it anymore, but it was a Cremant de Vouvray. So it was a Chenin Blanc sparkling from Vouvray. Actually, I've kept that as a secret for we did a sparkling tasting in one of my professional tasting groups, because it's important in the industry to do that and keep your palate fresh, as we were talking about before. And so I had that in my back pocket. Another one brought like a sparkling Chardonnay or something from Australia. It was like a Wolf Glass or something. And then another one brought like something from Santa Barbara that was just like, it's like a 50 case run of something from Santa Barbara. It was fun.
Very
Nobody
cool.
brought the, just bum red Cordon Rouge, which I say that one because it always stands out for me, because that one holds a special place in my heart. When I was living in Dijon and studying wine at the Agriculture University there, I took a trip up with a group to go to Reims, and we went down in the caves, did the whole tour, and so but I also think that it's hard to find a better sparkling for the price. I mean, for a quality of champagne that is for $40, $45, it's kind of hard to beat for me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was going to ask you still or sparkling. I think sparkling wins some points, and then I was going to ask you champagne or somewhere else. And Cremants, I'm a big fan of Cremants as well. I agree, great value and everything. So I'm curious. You've lived abroad. You've lived in Napa, and it sounds like France, and traveled. Where do you think? Who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality when you think about around the world?
Again, it's one of those difficult questions to answer. I mean, when I was living in France, you can get really good wine for $3 at a grocery store. Like they call them supermarchés. They're taking like Costco and like supermarkets
Yeah.
that Americans have produced are kind of moving elsewhere because it really is cost and time effective. But it's also kind of sad because when you live there too, you still have the old, like the bakery with the, you have to walk down the street to get your meat and then walk
Right.
down the street to the veg, which is wonderful. Or go to, the farmers markets, essentially what they have. But, you go to the supermarchés and you get like $3 wines that are fantastic for the price. I mean, I wouldn't put them against a $100 bottle, but, quality is an interesting thing. I think that, around the world, in terms of bottom tier, I would say Europe probably has us beat for that like bottom cost wine for sure. But they can keep their costs down because they've owned the property for 500 years, and their costs, their buildings and their equipment are all completely paid off, and the labor there is less expensive, and so they can keep their costs down for a higher quality than we can. But same thing with South America. Labor in South America is virtually nothing compared to what we have here, and so they can keep their costs down as well. But in terms of top tier stuff, it doesn't matter where you are. If it's, a top colleague, because all these places are bringing in or training quality people. And so I think that there's no way to say that one place is the best for quality compared to anywhere else.
Well, so you have a broad range, having lived in France. You said that you're half French, half Italian, and that you like to cook. How do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you follow rules? Do you think the rules of like white wine and fish are the end all be all, or do you have another approach?
Yes.
Or no approach?
I tend to follow the pairing guides because there's a reason why they do that professionally, and so I think it matters. But again, it's my opinion. So if somebody wants to put Cab Sauv with ceviche, if it makes them happy, I don't care. I mean, the whole point of wine and food at the end is to enjoy what you're drinking and eating. So if that makes you happier than trying to find, a yummy Sauv Blanc to go with your ceviche, do it up. I don't care. It's whatever in the end of the day makes whatever the happiest. But I do tend to follow pairings. I'll sometimes do contraries. My brother-in-law is a chef, James Beard winner actually, and so
as he slides that in very quietly.
As he's cooking tonight, it's still sad you can't make it tonight for our winemaker dinner. But he paired my Petite Verdot, which is just tannic monster of a wine, with an Icelandic cod with crispy garlic wrapped in cabbage and steamed, then topped with a Parmesan cream sauce, a house pickled relish of some kind. I think it was carrots and other things, and then paired those together. It's the most tannic wine you can imagine with a whitefish, and it was like perfect because Icelandic cod has a higher fat content, the Parmesan cream but it was fish with red wine, and it worked great.
So there you go. I follow the rules, but then sometimes break the rules.
Yeah.
So for somebody who's never tasted your wines, what do you think they're missing out on?
The uniqueness. My wines are, I'm actually a little old-fashioned. A lot of people in Paso are going to this very, very hot ferment extracted style, and I absolutely refuse to do it. Absolutely refuse. I'm traditional old-fashioned. I like long, slow ferments. I still do extended macerations, all of those kinds of things. And so my wines end up being very elegant and balanced. They're not overpower. They're still very big, still very excellent wines, but they're just unique and special. And I'm using unique and special grapes to get them to where they need to be too. Like the wine we're having now is 5-6 grape blends. So.
Let me ask you this then, since I think I know the answer. But if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Probably my flagship. That's my baby.
That's what I'm drinking right now.
Yeah, it's my flagship. It's basically the core of everything I do is to make the 1105 the best it can be every year. So it's really for me an expression of my wines from that vintage. And so for me, that's always me. So,
and again, the varietal breakdown is?
Petite Syrah predominantly, then Syrah, Grenache, Tannat, Petit Verdot, and those kind of change. Generally, Syrah and Tannat will be in the next one. Depends on the vintage. Followed by Grenache and Petit Verdot towards the end. And then it's always 1% Viognier because I'm co-fermenting my Syrah at about 3% rate. And so when you see the final blend through the computer and you get the percentages, it's usually somewhere between like 0.2 and 1 to 1.1% Viognier, depending on the actual percentage of Syrah. I co-ferment with Syrah and what the Syrah percentage is in the wine. So.
Yeah, well, I will say that for anyone that has heard of or tasted or kind of knows Petite Syrah to not big wines. Usually pretty intimidating. You either like that or not, but this wine has a lot of elegance to it. It's very, it's really fresh on the palate. It's not overpowering. Really beautiful wine. I think the Space Aliens would be happy.
I think so too. And for me, I always liken it to like a Chateauneuf because it does have the 6 grapes and it's kind of got so many layers and so much nuance and characteristic to it. But I say it's like a Chateauneuf, but on steroids because it is Petite Syrah based. So it's not Petit Verdot. So it's a bigger wine, but it's still got that aromatics and the elegance and just that complexity that a really good Southern Rhone wine has.
And it'll probably still stain your teeth, even though it's lighter.
Yeah. Lighter in quotation marks.
Right, lighter. You can't see my quotes.
Yeah, that's right.
So as you're in the middle of a harvest right now, it's another vintage, and you've been making wine for quite a bit of time. What would you, do you find that there is more variation from vintage to vintage or more consistency? Are there characteristics that you see from year to year? I mean, do vintages tell a different story for you here, or?
There are some differences. I mean, you do have vintage differences for sure. I think over time that you can still tell it came from the same vineyards or the same winemaker or the same region, but there are variations within that. Like this year, it was very hot towards the end, so we're going to see like warmer style wines, a little flabbier, a little more, a little bit more, so a little softer of a tannin, just because the heat has macerated the skins and the grapes. Whereas like 17 was a colder year, and so 17 is much more restrained, I guess would be a good word. 15 was very, very cold. A buddy of mine called it the winemaker's year because it's all these elegant, they're not the big extracted, overpowering wines that like a lot of scorers like. So
right.
You're going to see overall the scores, you're going to say that 15 was a terrible year. I like my 15s a lot. Like I really love. For me, 15 is probably my favorite. Well, 18 was phenomenal. 19 is looking amazing. But
well, all in all, your wines are really good, right?
Well, thank you. Exactly.
So, do you have any good luck rituals that you do at the beginning of harvest? I know you're underway. Was there anything that kicked off this harvest, or anything you do at the very end?
Basically, we got underway about a week before I was expecting. It just kind of hit all at once. I was halfway through finishing building my lab when all of a sudden we just started rolling. And so
no time for any rituals.
No time to figure out what my rituals were going to be, anything like that. The best one I saw was when I was at Quintessa. They would bring in like a legit witch, like a Wiccan witch, and she came in and like blessed everything. It was pretty awesome.
Haven't yet established that here.
No, we haven't done that yet. I'd have to find a Wiccan first. I'm sure there are a few around, but so.
Are there any signs or omens that you look for? And omens, I don't necessarily mean in a negative way, that you look for that will help you predict what a vintage is going to be like?
No. I mean, and even within a vintage, wines can always be a little bit different, and so it's hard to say because wine can surprise you. It's always unique and special, and so you can put this big, whatever you want on top of it, saying like, oh, it's going to be an amazing year, and you can have a terrible wine. You can say it's a terrible year, and you have an amazing wine. It just depends, and it can always surprise you because you can even have the same grapes from the same vineyard picked on the same day, done exactly the same thing, and if you have them in 4 different bins, they're all going to taste slightly different. And so you can have one bin that was just, for some reason, the most amazing wine of all time, with the bin sitting next to it with the exact same stuff being terrible. And so it's really hard for me because people are asking me in March how I thought the vintage was going to be. I'm like, we don't even have, we're barely in bud break. I have no idea. But you still have people asking those kinds of questions. And so until I actually get the grapes done, pressed in barrel, I'm not really sure. I mean, you never know. You could be pressing and somebody could trip and fall and spill their coffee into the wine, and then, so you never know what's going to happen. It's, I shouldn't have said that.
No predictors, no omens. So you're managing a vineyard. You're in there every day, visiting the fruit. Have you been known to talk to your grapes and your vines, or do you talk to them when they're in barrel? And if so, what do you say to your grapes, your wine?
I don't tend to talk to the grapes and the vines. I'm actually only there certain times I'll be there every day when we're actually working, but a lot of times it's every week or two. But I definitely talk to my yeast while they're fermenting, thinking happy thoughts, telling them they're pretty and I love them and all kinds of fun things. And then, I'll go
a lot of foreplay there.
That's right. And then I'll go through and play, I play music for them while we're kicking off. And then, I'll talk to the bins when I'm walking through and when they're in barrel too, if I'm tasting
pat them and tell them, good job.
Yeah, stuff like that. A great barrel when I'm tasting, I'll, put my hand on the barrel and tap and tell them, talk to them. Wine's a living thing. It exists in the universe. I mean, everything that makes wine comes from something that's alive. You get grapes, you get yeast, you get bacteria, you get everything growing. And so, it was created from living things.
Do you just generally play music for your yeast, or is there a specific type of music you play for the yeast?
Before I was playing very specifically, but here we just kind of have a sound system going. It's usually classic rock, but some of them I play like opera or classical music for. To inspire. Depends on stylistic. Like the one we're going to taste now, to me it's very elegant. It's like a Petite Syrah that I make very much like I would make any kind of cab. Long cold soaks, lots and lots of mixes during fermentation, extended maceration, clean racking, high impact barrels. And so I make it like I'm making a cab, but it's also very elegant and I want it to feel that way. And so I'll play opera, classical one, get them yeast pitched to inspire them to be more elegant, more refined. And then other things like there's a different Petite Syrah that's just big, inky black. The next one we're going to taste, and that one I play more like AC/DC or something a little bit more revved up. You know what I mean?
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Doctor.
Doctor.
My dad's a doctor, so actually when I went to Davis, it was pre-med.
And how did you end up in wine?
I took intro to winemaking in my freshman year, and it was all just a downhill spiral, or downhill slide, or whatever, downward spiral from there. So
it's that intro to winemaking class that always does it.
Well, like I said, I grew up drinking good wine. I mean, I remember being younger, being able to take probably back to 12, I was able to take a smell and a sip of my dad's wine, and so I just grew up with it. But it never actually clicked that somebody actually, even though my parents had winemaker friends, never clicked that somebody that anybody that could actually make wine for a living. And then that kind of clicked and it was done.
So when you're not working, and this is going to be a tough question because I know you're working 100-hour weeks right now, but when you're not working, how do you spend your free time? What do you do?
I like to be in the garden, my yard a lot, with my kids, spend time with my kids, read. I like to read, play some video games, relax, cooking. I love cooking. Those kinds of things, really. I need to get back, I finally took a day off last Sunday because I got my new employee to the point where I can just
take a break,
worry about not having to watch him do everything. And so I think we went out and picked tomatoes. I think I planted like 19 different heirloom tomato varieties, and so we were out there picking tomatoes, like baskets full, because I haven't been out there in 2 weeks. And then peppers and squash and melons and everything else we had just sitting there waiting for somebody to come pick it. And it's been weeks, and so we did that. And
So I know you have 2 little kids, so they probably occupy most of your time when you're not making wine. But on a rare occasion that you're able to plan a romantic evening with your wife, what sort of wines would you be opening to set the mood?
Depends on where we're going, what we're doing, what we're eating. Mostly it's an eating thing, depends on the kind of restaurant we're going to, or if I'm cooking dinner. If I'm making beef bourguignon, it would be whatever I felt like at that point. But, not cab probably, but, Syrah, Petite Syrah. Somewhere in there, Grenache. If I'm making steak poivre, then it would probably be a cab franc, somewhere in there. If I'm cooking Italian, we'd find something more Italian. I mean, it changes. If we're going to get, Thai food, I'd probably have a nice Gewürztraminer or a Riesling or something. So it's just depends.
You set the mood based on where you are.
Yeah.
So when you look back at your career or in your life, is there a piece of advice that you were given that sort of is a guiding principle? It could be a small or big, but what is that piece of advice and who gave it to you?
My very first real boss in the industry, the assistant winemaker Quintessa, told me that when you're working, you should always like when you're working on the clock, basically you just need to work as hard as you can and always treat the wine like it's your own wine. And so that's always been my philosophy, even working on other people's stuff as a consultant and stuff like that. That's a great one. And the other one I always keep in mind too is my first boss, the guy that hired me for Contessa, Aaron Pott, told me when I told him I started a winery, he's like, oh man, dude, making wine's super easy, selling it's super hard. And so I'm always keeping that in mind as I do, trying to get sales going and doing stuff like that. So those are the two biggest pieces of advice I think I've gotten in the wine industry.
Yeah, I've heard that one a lot from a lot of winemakers. Mm-hmm. They get advice. Selling is the hard part.
Yeah, everybody thinks winemaking is the hard part, but my job as a winemaker is to just get the grapes and help them become the best wine they can. It's not like I'm in there manipulating them and doing all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, we use some ads, but all of it's either oak derived or yeast derived. And so, I'll use oak chips for structure in the wine, especially if it's green. It helps pull green flavors out, give them more structure. VR Super is just refined like chestnut gall and oak gall. And so we use that for antioxidant purposes, pulls out more green flavor, raisins, botrytis, issues like that. But it's basically just tannin.
It's all natural stuff.
Exactly. And it's sacrificial, so it falls out and doesn't add any tannin at the end. Maybe a little Powerlees Rouge or, something like that for mid-palate enhancement during fermentation. It's basically just yeast that, for whatever reason, are giving more roundness to the mid palate. So it's all really very natural things.
So if advice to sell wine, like that's being the hardest thing for a winemaker, what's a piece of advice you could give to our listeners? Go buy wine?
Yeah, go buy my wine. That would be the best one, I would say. Yeah, I mean, you can always sell more wine until you're sold out, so,
Yeah. When you look back at your career, and you have a long career ahead of you, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
In terms of the wine?
Mm-hmm. Or your career?
Just having my own place and still being here after 10 years is a big accomplishment. We've had a few really good scores, but I love what I do and there's nothing else I'd rather do, but,
And then you made 2 port-style wines for the birth years of your kids.
Exactly. That way they have something. So those, of all the wines I have, those are the most important. Like, with COVID happening, or
yeah,
we can edit it out if you want. Everybody gets worried about what's going to happen over the course of the years, and my thoughts, in some of the dark times were, if anything happens, I have to figure out how to get these 3 barrels of wine out, or at least 1 barrel of my second son's wine out of there, so that I can still bottle it for him, because that's the most important wine. Anything else in here, I'll probably sneak out a few bottles here and there, but making sure that we have hit the first one, Chris's wine, which is already in bottle, and then a barrel of Jake's wine to bottle later when it's ready.
So
the most important thing.
So the 2 vintages are 2016 and
2018.
2018. So
we kept them nice and tight, so it's easier,
So if anyone ever gets their hands on these, they should just age them for the same amount of time it will take your kids to reach 21.
Sure, we'll get there. You'll taste it. It's Petite Syrah, so it's already a fairly ageable wine. But then you throw in the port in the mix, and I even added the alcohol, the high proof, and then let it sit for another 4 or 5 hours to increase the tannin extraction. And I kept the acids good, and so it's going to be it's going to age 40, 50, 60 years. So if you wanted to, it's fairly drinkable. It's a little bit not quite drinkable for me yet. Like usually, if I open it, about 4 days later is when I actually start liking it. But but it's a phenomenal wine. It'll age a long time.
Well, that's an achievement. So tell me, complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Work desk.
Well, your work desk has wine on it.
Yeah, but it's not usually for me to drink. It's usually bottles that are sitting there that there's a problem with, or that I need to remember to give to somebody.
Fair enough.
But most people's work desk is what I would think of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very true. So if you can imagine a scenario where you're sitting at a restaurant at a table, your wines are on the table, and the paparazzi are outside the window taking pictures because they're very impressed by who's sitting at that table. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you like to be sharing a bottle of MCV wines with?
That's a good question. There's so many good options that it's really.
You can throw a couple out. We have a dining room table. There's got to be.
It could be like 8 people.
Sure.
I don't know.
If you
no, I have no idea.
that quickly.
No, it's an interesting off. That you warned me you're going to throw some off the wall questions at me. So probably it sounds weird, but probably Gandhi or something like that. Voltaire would be amazing. I would love to drink with Voltaire. That would be fantastic. Who else? I would say, Camus, but he's just so dark. Living, there's quite a few fun people. I actually would love to go drinking with probably Barack Obama, actually. I think he's just such an interesting person. Not that I necessarily align with him politically, but he's such an interesting, nice person that I think I'd like to have a drink with him. But maybe Bruce Campbell. I know he owns a winery. He's probably my favorite actor. And then, I'm just...
That's a pretty full dining room table.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep going with interesting people that would be fun to drink with.
And all the better if you could get a shot of them holding MCV wines.
Works for me. I won't complain. But yeah, I mean, going through it, definitely probably Voltaire would be the top of the list because I think he would be the most interesting one.
Yeah. So, we were talking earlier, California for the last few years has endured fires and there's a lot of changes happening in the climate. And I know you're making these port style wines with this idea of moving forward, something for your kids for their future.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we'll be making wines in 500 or 1,000 years?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not in California, depending on how things go. But yeah, I mean, wine is something special because it's unique and wonderful, and it's thought-provoking, and it's soul-lifting. I mean, it's something special, and I hope we never lose it because even, there's all the other alcohols, and I'm a big whiskey drinker myself. I'm not a huge beer drinker, but I'm a big whiskey drinker. But even then, I'm not, when I have a glass of whiskey, it's more relaxing, hanging out with buddies, joking around. But when I'm having wine, you get into that kind of philosophical, relaxed,
Yeah.
You sit around, dinner with friends, and you're having wine and sitting there, and just, such much more of a fun, comfortable, relaxing kind of way.
Well, on the off chance that wasn't the case and you were sent to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you take with you?
And I just have unlimited supply, or just
absolutely
unlimited supply, huh?
And a chiller too, so don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, one of them would certainly be sparkling,
like a sparkling Vouvray or something else.
That's a good question. Probably anything sparkling would be nice, and then probably. I mean, I'm thinking about one of my own Petite Syrahs, but I like both of them so much, I only get 3. I mean, the 1105 is always, yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. So we got the sparkling. I definitely need to have a couple of reds. Probably some Pinot, nice Pinot.
From what region?
Probably Oregon or Burgundy. Don't tell anybody, but I'm not the biggest fan of California Pinot. It's crazy.
Don't tell anyone.
I actually make Pinot for clients here, so probably not the best thing to say out loud. But they taste fine. I make great Pinot, but I don't. My personal preference lies more in the earthy, acidic, really ageable Pinots, and then
a Petite Syrah.
Probably Petite Syrah would be my guess.
So sparkling, Pinot, Petite Syrah.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, you've done very well. We're going to play one last game where you're going to pair some wines with music.
Oh, you warned me on this one too.
I warned you. This is the only one I warned you on. But yeah, just some of your wines. I mean, we've got a nice selection of wines here, so I'm going to challenge you on your own wines. So let's start with your... we tasted a rosé when I first got here to whet my palate. And this is a rosé of Petite Syrah, Tannat, Grenache, Petit Verdot? Syrah. Okay. A lot of like a nice mouthfeel, like a more structured, bigger rosé, still fresh and everything, but one that could stand up to some listen to, or what does it make you think of? What style of music or musician?
That wine, it's like patio or pool wine, you know what I mean? So something that would be like when you're hanging out at the pool. So, I keep thinking jazz, but maybe not. Maybe like Cuban guitar kind of thing, maybe something like that. Like Santana would be an interesting, Carlos Santana would be an interesting, some of that stuff maybe.
Okay. And what about your flagship 1105?
To me, that one always screams like classical, just the elegance and the complexity and the nuance. Would be, I think, about right for that one.
And then I've had the pleasure of tasting 2 Petite Syrahs. So 2 different vineyards.
I think you're on
two different vineyards. Let's just talk about your Petite Syrah as a general thing, or if you want to pick one out, one of the vineyards.
For the music?
Yeah.
Well, the Rosewind, the one that's in your glass now, is that's one I definitely play opera for when we're doing the yeast, and so kind of like opera classical for that one, I think, because it's so different from other Petite Syrahs, and it's just so refined and balanced and elegant that I don't.
And then the Gemini Vineyards, which is the one that gets a little more AC/DC, would that carry through in the glass?
When I drink it, something like that, or maybe Tom Petty would be a good one for that too.
Okay, and we'll do one last, the port, the 2016 that we have sitting here that you made for your son. It might be a little young, but if you were going to drink it right now, what would you want to be listening to?
If I were drinking it right now, that's a good one because I'm not actually sure. I mean, maybe after dinner music, but honestly, I just, with my son, I just think of like Baby Shark all the time.
Well, there you go. Baby Shark.
He even has a toothbrush that plays it, you know what I mean? Like when he gets the right number of brushes, he gets it gives him a gold star, and then it changes songs and like tells him it's the craziest thing, but like I can't even tell you how much Baby Shark I've listened to. So, port style Petite Syrah from MCV paired with Baby Shark. I love it.
Well,
like I said, it's just because it's his wine and it's for him.
Absolutely.
That's what I think of right now. I mean, ask me again in 5 years and it'll probably change, but right now, just because when I think of Chris and music, it's like Baby Shark or Harry Griff or whatever his name is with all it's raining tacos and stuff like that.
Well, Matt, you survived. I have one last question for you. What wine region is at the top of your bucket list to go explore?
Uruguay.
Uruguay. Wow. Did not expect that one. Huh. Well, as you make your plans for Uruguay, if people want to make their plans to Paso Robles, how can they come visit you? We're in your tasting room, so they can make an appointment. Are you open 7 days a week?
We are open currently Thursday through Sunday, but hopefully we'll get back to more sooner rather than later, so Thursday through Monday. We're always open by appointment if people want to call or email us on the website. It's pretty simple, mcvwines.com. And we didn't make it complicated,
No.
And so, but we're always happy to do appointments. If you call ahead for an appointment, we can do barrel tastings and tours if it's something we've been interested in doing. So we have the tasting room. We'll have an outdoor patio. People are welcome to bring picnic lunches, or if you call ahead, my wife is also very happy to arrange cheese and meat platters and things like that. We did that for some wine club members last weekend. We work with Danica down at the Fonte Fine Cheese, and so she did a whole meat and cheese and cracker and bread spread, and we can do that for you. We can do pretty much anything.
So the great thing about coming to a small family-owned winery like this is you get a real customized, personalized experience. So check out MCV Wines and come visit them in Paso Robles. And Matt, thank you for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.